Jennifer Dixon, and I'm going to be moderating the meeting tonight. This is going to be an informational session and hearing for FCA US LLC for two proposed air permits, one for JNAP and one for the Mack plant. So we'll hear a lot more about that in a little bit. But of course, we have some things we need to talk about before we get started with all the fun stuff. So the first thing I want to do tonight is to introduce you to our air quality staff. But the first person I want to introduce you to tonight is Marianne Dolahanty, and she is our air quality division director. And she's going to just come online just a second here and kind of welcome everybody to the meeting. So Marianne, whenever you want to unmute yourself and turn your video on, I'll let you have the floor.
Whoops, I think my video's on, and now
yeah, you got it.
Finally unmuted. So thanks, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. I want to personally thank you all for taking time out of your evening tonight to participate in this info session and public hearing. Public participation is very important to Air Quality Division and to all of us at EGLE, and it is a vital way for us to work toward EGLE's mission of protecting public health and the environment. Public participation also creates an avenue for us to have these kind of conversations, as well as discuss tonight's proposed permit changes at the two FCA facilities, as Jen said, at Mack and at JNAP. The draft permit conditions come to you and were written in a way that keeps both public and environment in mind. We appreciate your flexibility in participating with us virtually. And we understand that this is not ideal. This kind of situation virtually is not the ideal way to hold a public participation process. And we understand that folks are living with different challenges right now, and that everyone's challenges are different and vary from person to person and family to family. So we welcome your thoughts as we continually look to improve how we outreach, how we conduct our outreach, and how we connect with folks. Just so you know that I'll be listening in tonight, so that any decision or my decision that's made on these proposed permits keeps both you, your comments, and concerns in mind. Again, thank you for joining us. And at this time, Jen, I will go ahead and turn things back to you.
Thanks a lot, Marianne. I appreciate that. Yeah, like Marianne said too, I mean, these virtual hearings are challenging for us too, and we know they're definitely challenging for our community members. So if you do have feedback specific to how we're operating these kind of meetings, we would definitely welcome that, in addition, of course, to comments on the two proposed air permits that we're here to talk to tonight. So I'm going to introduce the rest of my staff. So if they'd like to turn their video on, just so you can kind of get a quick introduction to who they are. I'm going to run through them fairly quickly. You'll hear from them mostly later, but the person you're going to hear the most from tonight, besides myself, which you'll probably get sick of hearing from me if I'm being completely honest, is Dave Thompson, and he is the permit engineer for this project. So Dave's going to be giving you a short presentation in just a minute here. If you were at our last meeting on this permit, or just informational session, it's going to be very similar to that with some additional information there. I also have on the line Bob Burns. He is the inspector for the facility. So he will be able to talk to you about inspections, compliance, things like that. He'll be available during the question and answer portion of the night. I've got Susan Kilmer. She is with our air monitoring unit. She's actually a supervisor there. So any information that you have or questions that you want to ask about air monitoring, she'll be available for those. Mike Deppa works in our toxics unit. And so if you have questions on toxics or things like that, he'd be definitely the person to be able to answer those. And then I saved the best for last, Steph Hangspa. I think I got her name right this time. If you listened in last time, I totally messed it up and I felt bad, and I had to write an apology note to her because I felt so bad, but we practiced beforehand. And even though I've known Steph for years, I still just haven't quite got that down yet. So thank you, staff, for being on and for being available to answer questions tonight. I really appreciate it. So if you guys want to go ahead and turn your cameras off, Dave, you probably want to just leave yours on, and but I'll invite you to turn those back on when we get to the Q&A. So just a little run through of what we're going to do tonight. The first thing we're going to do is the informational session. Like I said, Dave's going to be giving you all a short presentation on the proposed air permits. After that, we're going to be doing a question and answer. I'll talk to you a little bit about how you can get your questions answered there in just a second here. After that, so this is going to be either after we're done with Q&A, when you guys don't have any more questions, or at 7 o'clock, whichever comes sooner, we're going to be starting the official public hearing. And how that works is I'll have to read an official statement to open the hearing. Your comments will go on the record at that time of the night. We don't respond to your comments. If you ask a question during your comment, we won't be responding. So and I'll remind you about that later as well. So we want to make sure we do the question and answer portion first. So if you have questions you want asked and answered, we can get to those. We'll talk a little bit about ways to submit an official comment on the record. This comment period is not closed at the end of tonight. You'll still have plenty of time to submit a comment if you want to. So we will go ahead and just remind you of the ways you can do that. We'll talk a little bit about where you can find out other information, and I'll go over how you can contact our panelists and one other person who's been really helpful on these projects at the end. So a couple things here, logistics wise, just to let you know, all your lines are going to be muted during the meeting tonight, and we are going to be recording this meeting. We do post all of the recordings of any EGLE public meetings on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in not just this one, but other ones, you can definitely check that out. It takes a little while to get them up there because we do closed caption them, and what that allows us to do, we don't have the ability to do live translation, but the closed captioning does allow YouTube to provide a written translation if you know someone or if you are someone who reads better in another language, you might want to take advantage of that. Just so a reminder of how to ask questions tonight. So if you are joining us on the computer, you can use the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen, and then just go ahead and type your question right into that question and answer box. Or if when we get to the question and answer part of the night, if you really feel like you want to raise your hand and ask your question out loud, we will be unmuting people that do that. We'll also be unmuting you at the public comment period if you would like to voice your comment verbally. I'll remind you later on this as well, but you can also type your comment into the Q&A box. If you are calling in, which it does look like we have some people just calling in, if you type *9 into your phone, that will raise your hand on our end and we'll be able to unmute you. So you can either ask a question or speak your comment depending on what you would like to do. And how I will identify you is I will call you out by the last 3 digits of your phone number. So if you're like me and sometimes you forget what your own phone number is, but you memorize everybody else's, you might just want to make sure that you know that. All right, and with that, Dave, I am going to pass it over to you. So, and then you're going to just, as a reminder, tell me when you want me to advance the slides and I'll go ahead and do that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Jen. Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. As Jen said, my name is Dave Thompson. I am the lead permit engineer and one of multiple AQD staff that were involved in the review of both of these applications. The proposed modifications to the automotive assembly line currently under construction at the FCA Detroit Assembly Complex Mack, which I'm going to refer to as Mack or the Mack plant for the rest of the night, and the proposed new equipment and changes at the FCA Jefferson North Assembly Plant, which is going to be JNAT. That's how we're going to refer to it. So we're going to start with an overview of the air quality division and then talk about the proposed projects. So we know that pollution comes from many different sources, such as big farms, fuel burning vehicles, and various industries. And the overall mission of the air quality division is to protect public health and the environment. And the AQD has the authority to do this by regulating industrial sources. Go to the next slide, please, Jen. Thank you. Now the AQD is separated into some different functions. For example, some air quality division staff monitor levels of air pollutants. Other staff look at different toxics to make sure public health is protected. The AQD conducts inspections of regulated facilities through our district inspectors, and the permit section reviews applications and writes permits for sources of air pollutants to ensure that the operations comply with our rules and regulations. Now, the Air Quality Division has the authority to permit sources of air pollutants. However, I want to point out a few items that the draft permits don't address and that the AQ does not have the ability to regulate. You will want to talk to your local government if you have questions or concerns about issues such as zoning, noise, and traffic. Next, I'd like to give you a simple overview of the steps that the applicant and the AQD go through to get a proposed draft permit ready for comment. First, the applicant plans the project. The applicant then submits a permit application to the AQD. The application is reviewed by an engineer, and once a proposed draft permit is peer reviewed and approved by a supervisor, it is sent to the company for review and posted for public comment. Now, comments received during the public comment period are evaluated and can potentially lead to changes in the proposed permits. And finally, after all public comments are reviewed, a decision is made on the permit. And that decision can be one of three things. It can be approved as written, approved with changes, or denied. And next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the proposed projects. Now, FCA operates the existing automotive assembly plant at the Jefferson at JNAP and the automotive assembly plant currently under construction at the Mack plant. An automotive assembly line consists of three main portions. There's a body shop, which is for the assembly of the unpainted automobile, a paint shop where various paints and other materials are applied, and the assembly area where a lot of final operations such as glass, engine, and tire installation are performed. So what is FCA requesting? For the Mack plant, FCA is proposing changes to the supporting natural gas equipment. They're proposing a different number of tanks used for automotive fluid storage, and also they're proposing changes to the number and size of different pieces of emergency equipment that are going to be installed at the facility. For JNAP, FCA is proposing to install a new coating, two-tone coating process. They're moving an existing repair operation and refurbishing and upgrading some of their existing operations. So while reviewing the proposed projects, the AQD looks at a number of items. For projects that take place within a relatively close time period, the AQD has to determine whether the project should be aggregated, which basically means are they looked at as a single project or as separate projects. And after reviewing the two applications and applying guidance provided by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the AQD determined that the proposed changes at the Mack plant and JNAP are separate projects. Therefore, the Mack and JNAP application reviews were performed independently from one another. Now, for each project, the AQD reviews the level of emissions to figure out how the project should be classified. And based on the level of emissions and the type of equipment, we determine what type of review is needed, including which rules and regulations that project is subject to. Now, each application addresses specific state and federal regulations and whether that project is subject. Now, although already permitted and under construction, the Mack plant application is subject to what is called non-attainment regulations for volatile organic compounds, which is also called VOCs. This is based on the level of proposed VOC emissions at the Mack plant. Each project is also subject to and must meet other applicable rules and regulations. Now, throughout the review process and during development of the proposed draft permits, the AQD has ensured that the applicable state and federal rules have been met. Now, I did mention non-attainment for the Mack plant. Now, one part of figuring out whether specific rules are applicable to a project is the location of the facility. Now, this map shows the current attainment status for the state of Michigan. Excuse me, state of Michigan. An area is considered to be in non-attainment if air concentrations of certain pollutants are above the national standards. Michigan currently has non-attainment areas for two pollutants, and they're ozone and sulfur dioxide, which is also known as SO2. The Mack plant and JNAP are both located in an area that is considered a non-attainment for ozone, which is regulated through two other pollutants. And those are VOCs and oxides of nitrogen, which is also known as NOx. If the overall increase in emissions for an individual project for these pollutants is high enough, then that pollutant needs to go through what is called non-attainment permit review. Next one. So as I said before, the Mack plant project is subject to non-attainment permit review for VOCs. And one part of non-attainment permit review is performing a lowest achievable emission rate, or layer analysis. And this means that the Mack plant project must meet or exceed the lowest emission rate required by any state rule, or the lowest emission rate that has been achieved in practice for similar processes. Now, the previous layer review was reevaluated, and with the exception of one additional limit for two of these small emergency engines, has resulted in the same conclusions. And this includes the use of thermal oxidizers on the large coating operations to reduce the amount of VOC emissions. Another important piece of the non-attainment permit review is referred to as offsets. And offsets are emission reductions in the same pollutant for the same non-attainment area that must be greater than the emissions increase at the proposed project. The proposed changes for the Mack plant project resulted in slight reductions in overall emissions, and these emission reductions were established with the original Mack plant permit. And since the VOC emissions had a slight reduction, there were no additional offsets required as a result of this modification. Next please, Jen. In addition to meeting non-attainment review requirements, the Mack plant application shows that the project will meet other applicable rules and regulations. And these include toxic air contaminants that are compounds emitted from the project would meet their individual health-based screening levels. Computer simulations, which is referred to as modeling, were performed for NOx and particulate matter equal to or less than 2.5 microns, which is PM 2.5, to show that no violation of any standard is expected. The assembly line would also be required to place particulate filter systems on all spray coating processes that would lower the amount of dust and paint particles that exit the plant. Next, I'll speak a little more on the proposed JNAP project, as it also must comply with the applicable rules and regulations. For example, the project must show that it would comply with the state of Michigan Rule 702 for VOCs. And this review is based on what is called a best available control technology, or BACT analysis. And as a result of the BACT review for the JNAP project, VOCs from the proposed two-tone coating operation would be controlled by thermal oxidizers. In addition, the JNAP application also shows that all compounds, all toxic air contaminants emitted from the project would meet their respective health-based screening levels. Modeling was performed for NOx and PM 2.5 to show that no violation of any national standard is expected. And again, particulate control systems would be required on all spray coating processes. So if the permits are approved, FCA would have to comply with all final conditions that have incorporated the review of state and federal regulations. And based on the reviews performed, the final conditions for each proposed permit contains emission limits for the pollutants that are listed here. The VOCs, particulate matter, which is also PM, particulate matter equal to or less than 10 microns, which is PM 10, PM 2.5, NOx, SO2, and carbon monoxide, which is also known as CO. In addition to that, there are also limits on natural gas usage at each facility. Now, each proposed draft permit also contains testing, monitoring, and record-keeping requirements that would be used to show that both the Mack plant and JNAP projects would meet their respective limits. Now, the combination of emission limits as well as testing, monitoring, and record-keeping requirements would ensure that each project complies with those rules, with the applicable rules and regulations. And I'd like to thank you for listening. I'll give it back to Jen, and we'll continue with the question and answer portion.
And then I just accidentally rewound that, so I'm sorry. Let's get back to where we were here. Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate you taking the time to go through that with us again. So this is going to get us to the Q&A portion of the night here. And just to go over again for folks that may have signed in late, because I think we had a few add-ons while Dave was talking. So just as a reminder, this portion of the evening is going to be for us to respond directly to your questions, if you have any. If you would like to ask a question, you can type your question in the question box, and you just click on that on the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to speak your question out loud, you can raise your hand. So if you're joining us via the internet, you would just click the little hand icon at the bottom of your screen that will raise your hand for you. And then if you're on the phone, if you want to type *9 into your phone, that will raise your hand for us as well. So one person I forgot to introduce at the beginning of the night is Matt Tomlinson, and he's my co-host tonight. He's going to be helping me kind of moderate your question and answer. And he's also going to keep me on task and make sure that if you all raise your hand, that I realize that you did that. So thanks, Matt, for joining us tonight. Just as a reminder, I'm going to leave this slide up so you guys can see the staff people that we have here to answer your questions tonight. And if folks on the panel would like to turn their cameras back on, that would be awesome. And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yes. So in a little bit, we're going to go to the public hearing portion of the night. And just as a reminder, we're going to start that portion either at 7 o'clock or when we're done with the Q&A, whatever comes first. So we'll give you guys a little bit of time to ask some questions there. And I don't see any in the question box right now. So I'm just letting you know, if you're shy and you haven't typed your question in because you're hoping somebody else might have answered it already, that hasn't happened. So definitely go ahead and do that. And then there's one other thing, and Matt, you might remember how to do this. And I'm not going to say that I'm an expert at Zoom yet. I'm getting there. I'm just not quite there yet. But I know that there is a way for us to share the amount of attendees that we have on, and I can't remember how to do that. And I know folks a lot of times like to see how many people are on. So just to let you guys know right now, we've got 37 attendees and then 8 people on our panel. So if folks are interested in that. And then Matt, if you can remember how to do that, and I apologize that I can't. And if you could go ahead and share that, that'd be great. One thing that I was going to ask you, Dave, you talk a lot about the different pollutants, and I know there's a lot of them and they're can be confusing. And this question isn't necessarily for you, but I guess it's more of a comment. Whenever we talk about PM10, PM 2.5, it always reminds me of a video that we once did with Steph Hangsbot and her cohort, Jim Haywood, about the ozone action days or clean air action days, where she explains PM as little tiny dust, and it kind of is. So if folks are listening and you guys were thinking like, what are all these things that they're talking about? Those are definitely fair questions. So don't feel bad about asking them. There's no questions that are too easy when it comes to this. There's definitely a lot of complicated topics and a lot of complicated review and rules that go into these permits. I'll give you guys another minute to get some questions in, and if we don't have any questions here in a couple of minutes, then we'll just go ahead and start the hearing, and that's fine with me too. So I'll do whatever you all want. All right, and I've got a question. All right, so Bin Feng, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, so you should be able to talk. So you should be able to go ahead whenever you want and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, similar question that I brought up on the 25th of August is about continuous monitoring at the source. I know Dave mentioned a lot about monitoring stations for regional monitoring stations around Detroit, but I think the analogy of using regional monitoring station there are a lot of flaws in it, because the reason is I say that with the existing expansion, many of these Anatol residents like myself, we are just right next to the source. Even though the regional monitoring data show that it's fine, but however, the source may not be. So that's why I really constantly emphasize a lot, and please consider this very seriously. Is about continuous source monitoring system, and to ensure our health, because right now a lot of residents, we just live right next to the plant. In other words, we don't have any protection against any pollutants like FCA employee. They have air conditioning, they have filtering system, they stay indoor safely. But on the contrary, most of our residents, we don't have anything. We just have wide open windows for ventilation. So we have nothing to protect against pollutants. So this is my question. I would like to bring it to Dave and the panel. Please consider it very seriously. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. And I think there might be some clarity that we might be able to give, at least on how that review process does take you into consideration and takes the community into consideration when we write these permit limits. And so, Dave, what I would like to do is, and of course I forgot to pull up those other slides where we kind of show how modeling works, but I think that, and not if you agree with me, or shake your head if you don't, that might be the best way to at least start kind of talking about Mr. Fung's question about how we look at, how is the community protected? And then after that, because I can't remember this off the top of my head, if there is any continuous emissions monitoring on any of the pollutants at the facility, and if there's not, maybe you could just talk very briefly about, how the facility will do monitoring and what they do monitor, because it is something that, even though it's not maybe not a continuous monitor in all cases for all pollutants, there might be something to that. So maybe there's something that you could kind of talk about that, and I then maybe throw it over to Steph, and maybe she can talk a little bit about how the modeling is done when we're looking at these things, if you don't mind.
Sure. I guess in response to Mr. Fung's comment or question regarding the regional monitors, yes, the regional monitors are used, and I guess maybe Susan Kilmer might be better to answer this particular question, but it's used more for a general sense, a regional sense of what is going on. The regional monitors are not used for specific source compliance. Now, for this facility, there is no specific continuous emissions monitoring system or SEM system that is going in. However, there are requirements that are in the permit that show how they are complying with the PM and establishing what the PM is coming out of the facility. For example, there are multiple layers of of PM filtering that go on in the that go on in the facility. There's multiple layers. There's a layer of water wash. I'll just say there's multiple layers of filtering that go on in the facility. They are required to install, maintain, operate those in a proper manner such that there's already monitoring. They do periodic inspections of those. They're required to do testing that will verify that the emission rates of particulate that are coming out of their stacks are, match what was modeled. And I think like Jen Dixon said, I'll let Stephanie go a little more details on that. But basically, we performed modeling that is emissions from the facility, and they are, put into a computer simulation, and they are analyzed against various standards. And for this project, that modeling all showed that it would meet those standards. And like I said, there's also multiple layers of modeling, or multiple layers of filtering throughout the process that will reduce any type of PM. And Steph, I guess maybe if you can go into a little more detail on the modeling and how that works.
Yes, I can go ahead and do that. And really for the modeling, what my job to do is to make sure that not just the facility itself is meeting the standard. And I know you mentioned regional monitors. And one way those come into play as far as modeling goes is we do a cumulative analysis. We look at the facility, we look at other industries that are near the facility that we're looking at, nearby sources, and then in turn we add the background concentration from a representative monitor for the area. So we do make sure this cumulative impact is under the federal and state guidelines. But for modeling, as far as what modeling goes, is we pretty much build the facility in a computer program. We put all the buildings in, and we put every emission point in, whether it be a vent, whether it be an air vent, or whether a roof vent, or whether it be a stack. We put any emission point into the model, and we add meteorology to it, and we simulate, okay, as these emissions are going into the atmosphere, and when meteorology comes into play, and we look at 5 years, we specifically look at 5 years to ensure we can get the worst case meteorology scenario in there. So that's why we look at a 5-year analysis, not just 1 year. And
Okay,
pretty much
I don't want to interrupt you, but I did have Dave pull that slide up where it kind of shows what the model might look like, that example. So I'm going to have him share that with folks while you're talking. So Dave, I'm going to go ahead and let you share your screen here, hopefully.
Okay. Let's figure out how to.
And you should be able to. It's a work in progress here.
Yeah, it's showing host.
Hold on one second, and I'm going to let you do it. Sometimes it takes me a minute, so now you should be able to.
Okay,
Maybe.
let me know if it comes
There we
up.
go. It's starting.
Whoops,
There
sorry,
we
this
go.
is a
No, that's
this is the
perfect. Thank you.
incorrect one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but pretty much, this is a picture of what an air modeling demonstration would look like. So again, we build the facility in a computer program. Kind of in the middle, where you see the more clear area, it's the facility itself. The area, you don't see anything in there besides some red boxes, which those would be some probably volume or area sources, or pretty much that's the facility. And we exclude receptors within a secure property boundary of the facility. What a receptor is all these blue little crosses you see, or little plus signs that you see. Those are pseudo monitors. So what the model does, again, like I said, we build the whole facility within this computer program. We add background sources for this particular project. I think for NOx, maybe we included 5 sources that are nearby that also emit that pollutant. I think PM 2.5, maybe it was 6. It was either 5 for one and 6 for the other. I don't remember exactly what it is. But basically what we want to do is that each one of these little plus signs, we want to figure out what is the maximum concentration of that specific pollutant within this whole huge grid. We call this a receptor grid. These receptors, again, are basically pseudo monitors. So we want to know what the maximum impact is within this large area over the facility. And then we take that maximum impact, and for the criteria pollutants for NOx and PM 2.5 for this particular project, again, we had the facility modeled. We had additional sources nearby included into the model. We added the regional monitor, which was East 7 Mile, and I think it's about 5 kilometers, if I remember correctly, north and a little bit west of the facility. So basically we add all those together and ensure this cumulative impact is meeting the standards that are set in place. So that's just kind of an explanation of what modeling is. So for this, again, we didn't just look at the facility. We didn't just look at JNAP or Mack. We did do model runs to get a combination of both of those facilities together. Again, adding 5 or 6 sources that are nearby and downwind that also emit these pollutants. And then we, on top of that, added the background concentrations to that and ensured that that is meeting the standards that are in place. I hope that.
Thanks a lot. No, it's helpful to me, Steph, anyway.
Well, good.
So I'm gonna go ahead and share the PowerPoint back here. Hopefully that worked. Come on, computer, you can totally do this, Jennifer. I know you can. All right, yes, I do want to do that. No offense to you, Dave, but I want to stop sharing your screen so I can share mine, if you don't mind. All right, there we go. So I appreciate that, you guys showing that. I think that that map helps because I know what Mr. Fung's asking, and I know that in the permits as written, we didn't determine that that kind of monitoring was necessary. However, there's all these other things that kind of go into determining what we need to do for a facility like this and a permit like this. So we do have another question here. Let's see. All right, and this would be something that would maybe be for Dave and then maybe Steph, and maybe Steph first. So I'm gonna send this one to you, Steph, first. And if this wouldn't be your question, you can go ahead and send it back to Dave. But the question is, does the modeling data include information from the source? And if so, does FCA provide that data? So some of the information I think comes in with the permit application, but if you wanna talk a little bit about that, that would be perfect.
Yeah, for this project, yes, FCA does provide the modeled parameters, or all the parameters for all the inputs into the model. And what we do is we verify that they actually modeled what they said they were going to model as far as the emission rates and as far as stack parameters. So they did provide all the information for the FCA, I'm sorry, for the Mack and for the JNAP facility. As far as the additional sources that were included into the model, that's information that they received from us. So that's information we come up with. And we also determine the background monitor that should be used and what that value should be. That's included in the model. So yes, the information does come from the company, from FCA, but we do a quality check of it and to ensure that they're modeling what they said they're gonna model.
And this is a guidance that we have, that air quality has written, that companies have to follow when they're doing that kind of modeling, correct?
Yes, and we do little tweaks sometimes too. If we don't like a receptor grid, we might change it. If maybe, you know, we add terrain into the model, you know, that's something that we add into the model. I'll reprocess the terrain, for instance, you know, that comes in when we receive the modeling files. I know that's maybe getting too technical, but you know, we'll rerun some of the work. We won't just automatically take what they give us and keep it for the word. We do some quality control and some checking, and again, just to make sure, see if we can verify their impacts. Sometimes ours vary a little bit from what they came up with, but you know, for the most part, for this project, I think it was pretty similar from what I can remember. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. If not, I can try to.
Dave, I didn't know if would you want to add anything onto that at all? I think Steph did a great job answering that, but I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity if you need one.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is that the emission rates from those are from either from past testing at the facility, or there's required testing to verify those emission rates, and those because equipment that is not existing, it receives emission rates, and those are tested and verified later on in the process after it's been built.
So this goes a little bit to the next question. And the question was, is there a timeline for how often the model is checked or updated? So we don't necessarily rerun a model for a company that hasn't come in for a new permit application or modification to an existing permit. But that doesn't mean, you know, the information that we get from the modeling and all the other review goes into that permit application that then leads to what parameters need to be monitored and what things need to be tested and all of that. So Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I think that just talking about the specific type of computer models that Steph was talking about, we don't just do that on a regular basis.
No, there would have to be, the modeling would be performed if they come in for another modification, or if there is, for some reason, there has to be they would have to come in for a permit modification if for some reason they have to increase something, and then the model would have to be rerun to verify that they're still meeting all of the applicable requirements for that. But in terms of Unless there is a permit modification, we don't typically rerun the modeling on any periodic time frame.
Okay, thanks. So I just want to make sure I check to see if anyone has their hand up, and I don't see anyone that has their hand up anymore. So I'll give you another couple minutes for questions in case this conversation has led to any other insights or things that you might want to find out about. I personally love talking about air modeling. I think it's like the coolest thing. I wish I knew how to do it. Just to see that those receptors can be in so many different places, and the computer can say, you know, what the expectation is and what could happen there. And it's a really useful tool that we have at our disposal. So I always love chatting about it. And Steph, I think you did a great job describing that. All right, just checking our time at 6:41. So, and just to kind of reiterate, I know we got a few other people that have just called in the last few minutes. So I just want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions if they have them. If you're just calling in right now and you would like to ask a question, you can hit *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand so we can unmute you to speak. As always, our staff are going to be available to answer questions after this virtual meeting is over, and we'll definitely provide their contact information for you. So if you've provided us with a valid email address, you will get a follow-up of information after this meeting that'll include the recording, PDF of the slides, just some links to other information. So if you happen to be calling in, but you have a valid email address that you'd like to get information, I'll give you Dave's contact information at the end, and then he can always send your information to me so that I can get it to you. So I do see that I have a hand up. So your last 3 digits of your phone number are 915. So if that is you, be ready to talk. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So you should be able to go ahead and speak whenever you are ready if your last digits are 915.
Hello?
Yep, you got it. That worked.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead with your question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said, my name is Bomani, and I live on Harbor Island. And it's not so much a question as a comment about the air quality in this area. And we do seem to have some increase in asthma in some of the younger people in our area. Even I did hear about one newborn that might have had some asthma issues. I'm not sure if they're related, but I noticed that there's quite a few times that there are some foul smells coming from that plant, you know, gas smells, different things, smog, you know, heavier than usual, smog, I guess, is that what you call it? Or, you know, you're not able to see as well, I guess, in front of you. I live near the canal, and it just seems to be more fog there than normal. And like I said, the smells, is there anything that people are doing to organize to stop some of this? Because the community group that they picked, or the community committee, they seem to be kind of in line. They're not really, don't seem to really have any power to say anything about what Chrysler is doing. They seem more like a hand-picked group of sycophants, I guess, is that the word?
Okay. Well, it's an interesting choice, but I understand what you're saying. So I think, you know, Bomani, thank you for the question. As far as what community groups are in the area, I know that we do have some staff people from our Detroit district office that are listening in. They're not directly on the panel right now, but we can definitely get some of that information to you if you're interested in that. The other questions that you had about, you know, sort of some health-based things and odors in particular. So we do have Bob Burns on the panel right now, and he's the inspector for the facility, and I'm not sure when you joined, so you might have missed a little bit of that. So I apologize if I'm saying something, again, that you've already heard, but he is the inspector. We have Jeff Korniski, he's listening in. He's, like I said, not on the panel, but they can take complaints directly if you feel that you're having odors that are affecting you, where you may feel like you need to take particular measures to avoid those odors, whether it be closing your windows, going inside, anything like that. We'll definitely take your calls. We want you to call when you're smelling things that are abnormal to you. So we'll provide that information at the end. And if you have a valid email address, you don't say it out loud right now, but we'll give you, if you want to get a pen and paper to jot down our information so you can contact us directly. I think that might be really helpful for you. And I think that Jeff, I know you can't talk back, but I think that he'd be able to be more than happy to chat with you about availability, community groups, and how you can call in complaints if you would like to do that. So thank you so much for your question. Okay, so just looking to see if we have other questions on the line right now, and I'm not seeing any. It's 6:46, and I don't want to, pull your teeth out or anything or make you guys ask a bunch of questions. So I think we'll probably go ahead and get the hearing started here, unless anyone from my panel has any objections, which I don't see that you guys do. You're not making faces at me or anything here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start the public hearing. And just as a reminder to everybody, the public hearing portion of the night is the time where you can make a comment, but we won't be able to respond to your comment. So it's not like the question and answer session that we just finished up. There's going to be a couple ways that you can enter your comment onto the record tonight. And that's going to be either to type your comment into the comment box, and I'll read your comment out loud unless you tell me not to. And also you'll be able to raise your hand and speak your comment on the record. So in order to actually officially start the public hearing, I do need to read you an opening statement, and I will warn you right now, it is a little bit dry. So I apologize. Panel members, if you guys would like to turn your cameras off, I think you're done for the evening here. I may call on you later. I'll reserve the right to do that. And then Marianne and I are going to be listening in to the public hearing portion of the night, and she's going to be taking copious notes because that's what she does for this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read this statement to you. Please bear with me while we do this part. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this public hearing. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EGLE, and I will be the hearing officer tonight. We have Marianne Dolahanty, Air Quality Division Director, listening in on this hearing, and she is the decision maker for these permit applications. This hearing is for two proposed permits to install. One is for the installation and operation of new equipment and changes to existing equipment at the Jefferson North Assembly Plant, also known as JNAP. The second is for modifications to the automotive assembly line currently under construction at the Detroit Assembly Complex, or Mack plant. Both plants are in Detroit, Michigan. I have some background information to share before we begin. The Air Quality Division is responsible for regulating sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impact on public health and the environment. The law governing these responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Before the company can proceed with the proposed projects at JNAP or the Mack plant, they must obtain a permit meeting the requirements of Michigan's air quality laws. This means both projects must be capable of meeting state and federal emission standards, including health-based standards. The proposed permits must also contain conditions, including emission limits and specific ways of operating the equipment to ensure these standards are met. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in FCA's proposed projects at the JNAP and Mack plants an opportunity to provide information the department may use in deciding whether to approve the permits to install or if there are additional issues to consider. Please note the proposed permits to install are still draft permits. This does not mean the department has already made a decision. Instead, it reflects an initial review of the two proposals. We hope having the details of the draft permits available will help you in providing comments. Everything in the draft permits remains open for comment and further consideration by the department, including whether the permits will be granted at all. The department can only use the information you provide if it relates to criteria the department must use in making a decision. For example, concerns related to local zoning, truck traffic, or noise are not within the department's authority. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed projects. We'll be happy to take note of your position, but please understand the department is, by law, not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed projects. The hearing is being recorded and your comments will be part of the information the department will consider in making its decision on the proposed projects. The public comment period for the proposed permits began August 5th, 2020, and will end at midnight on September 18, 2020. Additional information may be submitted through September 18th via written or verbal comment during this hearing, by email, or by voicemail. After the close of the public comment period, the decision maker will review all written and verbal comments received. All significant air quality related comments will be considered, at which point final decisions on the permit applications will be made by the decision maker. The decision maker may deny the permits, approve as drafted, or approve with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permits, if any, have been changed in the final permits and the reasons for the changes. In all three scenarios, all interested parties, including everyone who was on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended the initial informational session or this public hearing, will be directly notified of the decisions. Included will be a letter from the decision maker regarding the decisions and, if applicable, the approved permits. You may submit a written comment at any time to the addresses we provide. You may also type the word comment into the question box and submit your comment. I will read aloud all comments you submit via the question box unless you state do not read. If you would like to make a verbal comment, you may raise your hand and I will unmute your line so you can speak. We will limit your comment time to 3 minutes, and I will do my best to address commenters in the order your hands were raised, but please bear with me as the technology has challenges for that. Department staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed projects and listen to those comments. So thank you for your attention. I will now begin calling names of those who have indicated they would like to make a statement. And as a reminder, if you are calling in, you can click *9 on your phone to raise your hand. And if you are joining us via the internet, you can click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand, or you can type the word comment in the question box and type your comment. And I don't have anyone currently with comments, and I do have one raised hand. All right, Mr. Fung, I will be unmuting your line, and then if you can just state your name for the record, and then please go ahead and state your comment. You should be able to speak now.
Yes, my name is Dan Fung. I'm a member of the residents on Venator Street next to the FCA plant. Based on my listening to the presentation twice, I really don't think that FCA have met all the criteria, and I really strongly oppose to the permits. The reasons are, number one, the continuous monitoring technology is available on the market, and I don't see any reason why FCA try to stay away from this program and try to use some other process or technique, because those other techniques, they are based on human and based on computer modeling, and those are not reliable. In the meantime, human lives are on the line right now. Even with the current setup, there are a lot of respiratory diseases among the members along the Venator Street. even now we have new expansion and new lines and new permits are being requested, and no technology has been used to ensure the health and the well-being of the people on the street, and I really strongly oppose to it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fung, for your comment. Okay, Mr. Newsom, I'm going to unmute you, and if you can please state your name for the record, and then you can go ahead and state your comment for the record. You should be able to speak now. Yep, I'm sorry, you should be able to speak now.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Greg Newsom. Good evening. Yeah, I want to thank you for the opportunity to issue a comment on the air quality permit. My partner and I are raising 3 children, and we're right here in the neighborhood next to Fiat Chrysler. And I want to just start out by stating my opposition to the project and to the approval of the permit, and to ask EGLE to deny it. And there are really 3 main pieces, and I think that the emissions can be further reduced. I think that FCA need to address issues with protections for residents, and we need to have better monitoring, as has been referenced, and I'm concerned about this self-monitoring piece. But to rewind just a little bit, I do want to recognize and thank the staff within EGLE who've given me extra support to understand the project more. And I've sent off, I can't tell you how many emails now, and gone back and forth with folks, and I think I've gained a better understanding based on that. So I want to recognize that. That said, I also want to recognize the importance of EGLE in this process to me as a resident. And while we're here to discuss the particular permit, while I'm living next to the project, we have not been heard by the mayor. We've not been heard by our city council members. As was referenced in the question and answer prior, the council, the Neighborhood Advisory Council does not reflect and seems to be, it seems that FCA have talked to a bunch of folks who are yes people for this project and not opened up and spoken to other folks. And this has been brought up for the past year. But I bring that back to point that we've tried to address this through multiple channels, right? And even our, we have some state and federal support from representatives, but many are silent too. And that's not EGLE's issue, right? That our representations, there are many people who are working to change that representation to better reflect the needs of the people rather than concerns over profit. But as part of the state regulating body, EGLE holds a great deal of power as to whether the pollution is increased in our backyard, or if FCA will do the right thing and work harder to reduce the emissions, increase the protections, and improve the monitoring. So I really want to lift EGLE up in that regard. We've tried all these channels, and you're a way for us to change course with this. And that's a very, very important thing to me as a resident and for my 3 kids. I also want to lift up and state the importance of the decision and others that EGLE makes across the state in light of the Black Lives Matter movement. Even the Trump administration's EPA have recognized the existence of environmental racism and so-called frontline communities that are majority Black and brown, like our neighborhood. And while rightly so, a great deal of the discussion and the calls for change have been on police violence, it's also important that in this forum and for EGLE to recognize the impact of racism in public policy and regulation on Black and brown communities that I live in here, right? And so we've heard the process is only about the proposed changes at Mack and JNAP. I would like and propose that EGLE kind of open up and consider the cumulative impact of what FCA is doing here, think about the historical impact, and look at the public health crisis that is happening in the midst of this decision, especially with COVID-19. So there's like a big paradigm shift that needs to happen here in order to address environmental racism, in order to address what we're calling frontline communities and to make this stuff right? So I implore the folks at EGLE to consider this when making this decision. And I also implore FCA to change course on this and to consider things differently. So again, there's these three pieces. First, reducing facility emissions. I don't know why, when we are paying for nearly half of, yes, this overall project, right? It's public funded. There's a ton of investments, abatements, and otherwise going in to make this happen. I don't know why we're getting retrofitted, re-engineered equipment instead of new stuff and better stuff, right? And I know that FCA have done a lot of balancing and checks to the ledger and everything else to make this work out for them. And it's probably lowered the emissions on that, but we can do better, and we should do better based on the fact that the public is funding half of this project. Now, I'm also concerned about the filtering happening at the source, and if we could somehow increase the filtering at the source, put a better filter on the cigarette, if they're gonna make us smoke, right? We should have the best filter. And why they're not doing that, I don't know. I would like for EGLE to address that, okay? And then we've got protections, increasing protections for residents. We've heard from Ben on Beneteau, and you know, there are folks all over the place here who don't have the protections that others do. Their windows are open all year. They don't have things sealed up right. And we really need to make sure that FCA address those pieces. And you know, home repair, you know, making sure that particularly like public spaces like schools, our public libraries, those spaces are filtered. So I really want to implore EGLE to consider an increase in protections for residents. And then finally, this improving the monitoring piece is really important. I still have a very hard time after engaging with this process for over a year now with the fact that Fiat Chrysler gets to hire somebody to monitor and send you all stuff instead of us having direct access to the monitoring process and how this happens. And I know that's a fundamental change, but we need fundamental changes. I don't trust FCA. Last year, FCA paid $800 million to settle charges for the EPA that it installed software designed to cheat emissions tests in violation of the Clean Air Act, right?
Mr. Newsom, just to let you know, you have 30 more seconds. So
Thank
if
you.
Want to wrap it up? That'd be great.
So yeah, I'm about to. But the thing is here that you know, I don't trust FCA that they are sending you all the right information. I know you check it and everything else, but I just think that we deserve better as residents here, sitting next to this plant that's being paid for with half public funds or a large portion of public funds. And I'm imploring the decision makers at EGLE to change the paradigm, to change the way this is done, and to send this back to EGLE to address these concerns so that we get better results. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment, Mr. Newsom. Senator Chang, I have you up next. If you would like to speak, you should be unmuted and ready to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much to EGLE and all of your hardworking staff. Really appreciate this public hearing, and also appreciate the comments from a number of the residents who have spoken or asked questions. I'll be quick. I just had a couple quick things. One, to reiterate the point that a number of others have made around monitoring. I would just echo that I hope that EGLE will continue to work towards the strongest possible monitoring plan to ensure that we have the best data and that it's you know, in close proximity. I think that is something that you're hearing from residents, and is something that you know, would help to ensure that we have access to that data, and something that we know is from a trustworthy source. The second point is just around, the resident who lives on Harbor Island in Jefferson Chalmers. I made a comment about odor, and I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I may not necessarily be as a part of this permit, but I hope that EGLE and FCA will do more to, in partnership with community organizations, to ensure that residents know who to call to report emissions problems and odors and things like that, because I think that that is something many residents may not know, that there is a hotline, and I'm obviously willing to help, with that education piece as well. But I think it's important so that EGLE and FCA can hear directly when there are complaints. So I'll commit myself to getting out some of those educational materials, but hope that EGLE and FCA will be interested in as well. And then lastly, I will point out that there are a number of requests that the community had made last year as part of the additional community benefits process that, again, we're grateful that EGLE made that happen. However, there are a number of unfulfilled requests from the community. And while it may not necessarily be a part of this permit process, I would just encourage EGLE to, through your ongoing conversations with FCA, raise the fact that there are still a number of outstanding items that residents are continuing to push for, especially those that live in close proximity, and especially our youngest little lungs and most vulnerable lungs. Many kids right now are learning virtually and may not be actually in schools, but when they all return, and when the plants are both up and running, I think that it should be a priority to ensure that their health is protected. So thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Senator Chang, for your comments. We do have a written comment, so I'm going to go ahead and read that, and this will hopefully give you guys an opportunity if you would like to still raise your hand. We still have time for that. So this comment is from Donna M. And Donna stated, concerns about the air quality for surrounding communities and would like to know more about protective filters and devices that are specific for residents. Are there other recommendations for residents to reduce this health impact? I do oppose this permit based on the well-being of mine and other communities. So that was the only written comment that I have so far. I'll give you guys another minute or two to raise your hands if you would like to make a comment or to type in your comment before we close the hearing officially. Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands or any other written comments, so I'm going to go ahead and read the closing statement. That will officially close the hearing. However, that does not mean that we are not still taking comments. We are still taking comments until the 18th, which I will reiterate in a moment. Thank you for taking time to participate in this meeting tonight. We appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on September 18, 2020. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended public meetings related to the proposed permits will be directly notified of the final decisions. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again for participating. So a couple other things if you need to leave right now, but I do want to share how you can continue to make comments on these proposed permits, as well as how you can contact us, especially if you have odor concerns and things like that. So if you can bear with me for a couple more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and wrap the meeting up. So if you would like to make a comment still, we have several ways to do so. You can write in your comments via mail. We still take those. Because we do have quite a few people listening on the phone, I'm just going to kind of quickly read these addresses off. So if you want to jot them down, you can go ahead and do that. So the address is to our permit section manager at EGLE, that's EGLE, Air Quality Division, or AQD for short. And the address there is P.O. Box 30260, Lansing, Michigan. And the zip code for that is 48909-7760. And just as a reminder, I will be sending the PDF of these slides out. So if you're joining us on the internet, you do not have to write this stuff down. It's a lot of information for you for sure. We also take those comments via email. And that email address is EGLE, E-G-L-E again, not like the bird, -AQD -PTI public comments, and PTI public comments is all one word. And so that's P as in Paul, T as in Tom, I as in igloo, I should have said. And that's at Michigan.gov. So EGLE-AQD -PTI public comments at Michigan.gov. And if you can just remember to put in the subject line FCA permits, that would be great. You can leave us a voicemail. So if you're calling in, this is a great opportunity. If you have a comment and you didn't want to share it tonight verbally to everybody, go ahead and give our voicemail box a call. It's just as valid on there as it is now. And that number is 517-284-0900. All right, so a couple other things before we go, just to let you know, if you were listening in tonight and this is kind of the first time you were hearing about these proposed permits for FCA, we do have a lot of information on the web. Of course we do, because we like to definitely provide you with a lot of technical information, but there's information, a proposed project summary, which is just kind of a high level about what we talked about tonight, what the proposed projects are. On the technical fact sheet, if you really want to dig deep into the rules and regulations that are kind of behind the scenes of these permits, you can check that out. The proposed permit terms and conditions are on there as well. And then we will also link the recordings of these meetings on there. So we'll be providing that information for you as well. But if you are listening in on the phone, and you have access to the internet, you can always go to Michigan.gov/air, click on permits, and then look for permits open for public comment. And you'll get to the page that will give you this information. So we talked about complaints tonight, and I know I called one of our assistant district supervisors in our Detroit office out, Jeff Korniski, and he is more than happy to talk to you about odor complaints, take your complaints, make sure that an inspector goes out and checks that out. We take odors really seriously in air quality, and we definitely want to know if you're having issues especially where you feel like you need to change your normal behavior to accommodate what's going on. So you can contact Jeff. I'm going to read out his email address for those who may want to jot this down. His email address is korniskij@michigan.gov, and I'm going to just spell that. It's K as in kick, O as in octopus, R as in red, N as in Nancy, I as in igloo, S as in Sam, K as in kick, I as in igloo, J as in Jeff or Jennifer or jump, whatever one you want. So Korniskij, and that's at Michigan.gov, and Michigan is all spelled out. His direct line is area code 313-912-6255. And I'm not going to read everybody's email and phone number because that'll drive you guys all crazy. But if you get a hold of Jeff and you have other comments or concerns, or you want to get a hold of another panel member, you can definitely just pop Jeff an email or give him a call, and he can hook you up with that if you're just calling in and you don't have access to the internet. So he's more than happy to help out with that. Like I said earlier, all the panel members' contact information is provided on the screen. Senator Chang had a good comment, and although we don't normally respond to comments, she did mention our hotline. We do have a hotline. It's a 1-800 number that folks can call, and I will definitely be providing that as well for everybody who is listening in. The last thing of the night is just to thank you all for participating with us. We really do appreciate it. We know that there's a lot of other things you'd rather be doing with your time. And I know it's one of those things where it's important to you. You want to make sure that you're being heard, and we want to make sure that you are being heard as well. So we greatly appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thanks again.